Witam, dobre, wieczór. Good evening and welcome to the Pioneer Power Showgrounds and the Pancake House for the presentation on Polish heritage and the Polish immigrants that came to this area in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. My name is Tom Retka. Yes, I am a descendant of one of the Polish Retkas that purchased land in Darien Township. It is very important that we remember this area's history, which is rich in Polish culture and steeped in the traditions that were learned and acquired many years ago. Our presentation will talk about how and why these Polish folks came to this area and the freedoms they yearned for and were able to achieve in this wonderful country of ours. This was the first tractor that started to replace our workhorses. This is a W.C. Alice Chalmers, first made during the Great Depression. The cost then was around $700. Over the next 15 years, 178,000 of them were made. Many of the Polish farmers and others in the area owned this versatile orange Alice Chalmers. As a reminder, please come to the Pioneer Power Show this August 22nd through the 24th, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. This will be Pioneer Power's 52nd year. Come and see me up on this pole and see many other tractors, steam engines, and see how early farming used to be done with demonstrations throughout the show. We thank you all for gathering this evening to hear the Polish history story of this area.
But I wanted to let you know how I came across it. It was at his sister's celebration for life. I knew him, but not that well. So I got on the mic, as I often do, and I started waxing a few words together. And after that, Richard came up to me, and I handed him a flyer that he was very interested in. He just visited the church. And before we get too much further, I want to say thank you, Lynn Pulowski. That church looks beautiful. She's done a wonderful job. And we have Annie off to our right, serving good food, great cuisine, and Wiesenbrau with some of their specialties. So please enjoy. We'll probably get a few more in as time goes on. But Mr. Jankowski, I'm honored, very much honored, that you said you wanted to come here and address this Polish group. So thank you.
Well, Danny, thank you. You never could read in school either, but thank you very much. Beautiful job. I appreciate it. What a nice group here. I picked up a gal who's hitchhiking on the way over here, and she only had one shoe. And I said, "Did you lose a shoe?" She said, "No, I found one." So you see, you never know what you're going to run into. A lot of people know who I am, and I see a lot of people here that I know over the years. I've been in radio for so many years, and go over basketball, baseball, and football, and public address announcer. And now I speak all over the United States and Canada, actually. So it's been a great time. I do a lot of nursing homes now. I get about that age myself. But I was in a nursing home in Northfield, the Three Lakes Care Center, and I walked up to a lady sitting in a wheelchair. And I said, "Do you know who I am?" And she said, "No, but if you go to the front desk, I think they can tell you." You know what? So I wrote in all kinds of shots. And this 80 or 90-year-old man and 90-year-old woman were in this nursing home. And the woman said to the man, "Why don't we go upstairs and make love?" He said, "I can't do both." So I think, and I've always said, a sense of humor is very important in life, I think, especially nowadays, with the way the world is. We now have a new Pope, of course, but Pope Francis before he died, he was ill, and he was really ill a little bit, not much, but they thought it was COVID. They thought he had COVID. So they re-examined him, they found out it was a bird flu given to him by some cardinals. Think about that for just a minute. For fun stuff and laughter, again, I don't care. My wife is Arlene, and she was a Novak in Ukraine. Arlene Novak, and she was 15 years old when I first dated her. 15, she knew nothing about anything, and I can tell you that's true. So I took her out, brought her home to the farm. We're sitting in the car outside the farm. I said, "You want to get in the back seat?" Oh, she said, "No, I'd rather stay up here with you." You know, just so all kinds of stuff that you run into. But we've stayed married for 59 years, and that's hard to believe. Thank you, thank you. But yeah, I get around. Callahan, what a classy guy he is. Were you president of your freshman class or any class?
Nothing. I was just a farm kid.
Well, just a farm kid. That's right. You did all right for yourself. Danny Callahan, right? But the Polish stories. Somebody said, "Do you have any Polish stories?" I guess I do. I have a lot of good ones. My Polak who tried to beat the freight train and to hit the 17th car. Think about that for just a minute. Or the Polish kamikaze pilot, he flew 46 missions. So those are crazy things that we can all talk about. So, and there's so many different types of stories. It doesn't matter what they are. Just great stories. I guess I could tell this story about my wife and I. There are any kids here, though. My wife and I were watching TV the other night, and I'm switching channels from the fishing channel to the porn channel, believe it or not. Fishing channel, porn channel, fishing channel, porn channel. Finally she said, "Leave it on the porn channel. You know how to fish." So, and it's just a great opportunity for me to travel the country and have fun no matter where I go. It doesn't matter. These two guys were going to go on vacation. One guy said to the other, "What are you going to do?" Well, 2 years ago, I went to Europe and my wife got pregnant. Last year, he said, "I went to Germany and my wife got pregnant." Well, he said, "What are you going to do this year?" She said, "I think I'll take her with me." Over at the Catholic Church now, that was fun. And I get being a Catholic for so many years and funny stuff. And how many of you know what Christ said at the Last Supper? He said, "All you guys that want to get in the picture, get on this side of the table." Most people have never heard that before. But there's so many different stories. And I love so many stories about religion and priests and nuns, and it's crazy stuff. I remember this nun that was in a special mission, she could say 2 words every 5 years. So she walked in after 5 years and saw the Mother Superior. She said, "Hard beds." And she turned around and walked out. 5 more years went by and she came back in and she said, "Poor food." And she turned around and walked out. So 5 more years went by, that's 15 years, and she went to the Mother Superior. She said, "I quit." Mother Superior said, "It's a darn good thing. All you do is bitch." You know, just crazy stuff. So this world, it's great to be here. I've never been in this town, as they call it, Russellville, right? Is that what it is? But I've never been here. I never lived in New Prague all those years, and so it's real. And a beautiful girl came up to me when I walked in. Thank you for that. She was saying some nice things about it. Nice, great people. Sherry Brown was Brown when I knew her, and New Prague. She was a sophomore when I was a senior. She was a good friend of my wife at that time, Arlene. So it's nice to see her again. She still looks pretty good to me, I'll tell you that. Absolutely. It's good. I think that a guy like Callahan, who came to my sister's great celebration that we had almost 2 weeks ago, and it was really wonderfully done, and I think Danny said some nice things. And he bragged me up a little bit too much, probably, but I sure appreciate what you said. And Dan, I did get comments from people that said they really enjoyed what you said. They thought it was very nicely done, and I know I certainly did. I've been in sports all my life, announcing sports, playing sports, and a lot of things happen. Yogi Berra, how many remember Yogi Berra, or the name? A lot of people? Well, Yogi was with the New York Yankees, and the streakers, I'm sure you all remember when the streakers were everywhere. 2 streakers jumped out of the stands at Yankee Stadium, ran across the field, and jumped up in the bleachers on the other side. So after the game was over, they were interviewing Yogi, and they said, Yogi, were they men or women? He said, I really don't know. They had bags over their heads. Think about that one for a minute or two. Yogi was great. He had all these great comments, and I think probably they were true. It was the Yankee Stadium before the Old Timers game. They always have introduced the guys who passed away are up on the board. And Yogi's standing next to Johnny Blanchard, who was a Yankee catcher. And he said, you know, I hope I never see my name up there. He was just terrific. He has so many great stories, all kinds of stories. It's great. One of my favorites is, how many remember Halsey Hall? You go back most of you. Okay, here's a great. Halsey was the type of guy that played jokes on Ray Scott and Herb Cardile in the press box. He did all kinds of things. One day he's smoking a cigar, and the ash dropped on Ray Scott's sport coat. And there was a fire that actually started. They finally got it out, and Holly started to laugh. Ray said, what are you laughing about? First time I've ever seen a sport coat turned into a blazer. You know, there's just great things like that that he would do. But he used to love to plan. So one day in Baltimore, Maryland, 95 degrees, and Holly's in his hotel room, and Ray Scott and Herb sent a prostitute to his hotel room. And he's 79 years old. So she knocks on the door, he stooped over, and he comes to the door, and he says, oh, she had very little on, a 95-degree day. Oh, he said, can I help you? She said, I'm here to give you super sex. He said, I'll take soup. You know, just... So he was a terrific individual, and all these people that, you don't hear a lot about some of them, but some are jokesters, and I guess that's where I got a lot of my opportunity to speak. And I had a lot of help when I was a youngster going to Brown Institute for Radio. I had guys that were Major League Baseball announcers that I got to know, Merle Harmon, Ray Scott, all kinds of guys, Dick Enroth did the Lakers games, and they all helped me along the way. He said, Dick, do this, do that, here's a good shot. So I started out in radio in a little town of Ladysmith, Wisconsin. A lot of you might know where that is on Highway 8. And from there, Shakopee, I was a new radio. A lot of you heard me. How many of you heard me on K-Check many years ago? I bet you did. I bet you did. I guess they didn't. But I was there for a couple of years, and I still do stuff for K-Check. I did a show called the Coaches Roundtable for 38 years. And people still say, Dick, why don't you go ahead and do it again? Shoot, no, there's no way you can do it. First of all, today's coaches don't cooperate like they did, several years ago. So it's all different. You have to be very careful of what happens. I had one when I came, I didn't go to radio before. Jeff Bassett, my son drove me down. And I don't think I've ever been in this area before. And I like the pancake house, although there's nobody here giving me any pancakes. But I still like the opportunity just to be here. It's really fun. It's great. All right, I suppose we have any hunters. Dan, you hunt a little bit, right? Not anymore?
I just chase cows.
Well, what do you do with them when you catch them, for Christ's sake?
Eat them.
That's good.
Butcher them, milk them.
Well, the guy was hunting, and he accidentally shot a loon, which of course is illegal. And so the game warden saw him, but he didn't say anything to him until he saw him 2 weeks later. He said, hey, I saw you shoot that loon. That's a terrific find. And he said, oh, man, what'd you do with the loon? He said, I cooked it and I ate it. He said, that's another find. He said, what does a loon taste like? He said, somewhere between a trumpeter swan and a bald eagle. Really? Just things that are so wonderful. You laugh at. And I get people say, tell that story. I had a lady ask me, do you have any naughty stories in the nursing home? Do you have any naughty stories? I said, well, I've got them, but I don't think I can use them. And they didn't want to hear, they don't care what it is. I can see just about anything, I suppose. But I don't like to do that. I try to make them laugh, and even some of them cry. Because I'll strike a note or something of something that happened many years ago to them. I had a guy that was in Philadelphia, and he had never talked. The nurses said, if you get him to talk, it's a miracle. So I talked about, all of a sudden I said, I'm a big Philadelphia Eagle fan. And he said, whoa, he raised his hand going crazy. I said, yes, sir. He said, I'm from Philadelphia. I'm from Philadelphia. I love the Eagles. So then I read off a lot of the Eagles from years ago. Chuck Bednarik, John Van Boppen, people that he would remember. And he just cried like a little baby. He couldn't stop crying. So after I was through, the nurse said, what a great thing you did to come in here and talk to him, because nobody else can ever get him to talk. So I get very happy about that type of thing, and people really enjoy it. You know, 2 years ago, my wife and I weren't having a very good time. I was very mean to her, and I said, no matter who comes to this beautiful home of ours, I will be nice to them. So an hour later, knock on the door, 2 guys standing on the steps, beautiful suits and ties. And I said, hi, fellas, may I help you? Where were the Jehovah's Witnesses? Oh, really? I said, come on in. Sit down. Would you like a glass of lemonade? He said, yes. Would you like a pillow? That would be great. So I'm talking to one of the Jehovah's Witnesses, and I said, what would you like to talk about? He said, I really don't know. We've never gotten this far before. So, all this stuff is real. It really is. And it's just, I can thank God for my opportunity over the years to what I've been able to do. I was a very poor student in high school. I was what you call an underwater student. All my grades were below sea level. And I just was terrible, and I didn't know. The teachers all said to me when I graduated, we hope you get a job in sports because you don't give a darn about anything else. And that's very true. I really didn't. And I was lucky. People, as I mentioned, people helping me along the way. They would do. I speak a lot, as I mentioned, Canada, New York City. I've had all these different banquets. I've had probably 1,500 to 2,000 banquets in my life that I've done, emceed. Go for basketball over 600 games. You know, it's just amazing when I think I should have kept track of everything, but I didn't. But I'll be back. I'm going to close this tonight with my version of the Minnesota Rouser. I brought my trombone kazoo, which you've never seen before probably, and I'll play that then just before we get through. But just to remind you, when you're driving home tonight, be sure to take your car. Secondly, when you drink, don't drive because you might spill it. And third, and most of all, as the old maid said to the peeping Tom, thanks for looking in. Thank you. I'll be back later. Thank you.
Coming. Hello, I'm Tom Retka. I'm a 5th-generation descendant of Polish immigrants, family who settled here in LeSueur County. And we'll get to my first slide here.
Is that it?
No, that's not it. That's a picture of Dan Callahan.
Some of you have seen him in the lifts, saying, well,
All right. Here we go. We're going to talk about why did our Polish ancestors leave Poland for LeSueur County. In the 1800s, about 2.2 million Polish immigrants arrived in America. A group of these Poles came to LeSueur County. Here in LeSueur County, most Polish immigrants arrived between 1872 and 1890. The answer to why Poles left Poland is partly political and partly economic. And I'm going to use this. How's the volume? Okay? Yeah. All right. Since the 900s, Poland was a country always changing its boundaries. It grew in size and shrunk over and over. In the mid-1500s, United Poland grew to its maximum size of 420,000 square miles and was the largest state in Europe and perhaps most powerful nation. Its power came from its vast resources, agricultural, forest, and mining, and their value to the rest of Western Europe. Poland spanned from near Kiev in today's Ukraine in the east to near the Oder River in the west in Germany, and from the Baltic Sea in the north to the Carpathian Mountains in Hungary and the Ottoman Empire in the south. The official language of all this land was Polish and Latin. But by 1795, Poland didn't exist as a country. The form of government during the heyday of the Kingdom of Poland was extremely democratic and controlled by the nobles. It had a peculiarity called Golden Liberty. Under that system, all nobles, regardless of rank, economic status, or their ethnic background, were considered to have equal legal status. A single dissenting vote by one of the nobles could stop any new proposed law or a change in government form. This contributed to chaos within the Kingdom of Poland. From the late 1500s to almost 1800, Poland was almost perpetually at war with many countries, including Sweden, Russia, the Austrian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and hosts of smaller kingdoms. From 1772 to 1795, in what was called the Polish Partition, Poland was split between Prussia, the Austrian Habsburg monarchy, and Russia, and had no independent existence. Politically, ethnic Poles were either Prussian, Russian, or Austrian, since these three countries controlled Polish areas. The Prussian and Russian versions were hard on the Polish natives. For instance, in the Prussian part of Poland, German lay teachers replaced the Polish priests in the schools, and German became the official language of instruction. Polish priests went into hiding, so many Poles could only hear Mass said by Polish priests in secrecy. The Prussian government established the Colonization Commission, which bought up land from Poles and brought in German settlers. In the Russian part of Poland, administration, law, and education were all carried out in Russian. Private education in Polish was forbidden. Young men were liable to conscription as ordinary soldiers in the Russian army if they failed to pass Russian schools. Roman Catholic religion was outlawed and replaced with the Russian Orthodox Church. All street names had to be in Russian. The Austrian part of Poland, things were less harsh, but it wasn't like the Poland of old. To understand the economic situation, one must understand the makeup of the Polish people in the 1800s. In this period, the people of Poland were organized in these clearly defined groups: nobility, clergy, townsmen, and peasants, as shown on the pie chart. The nobility was comprised of both magnates, gentry, and Poland's powerless king. The nobility comprised about 12% of the Polish population. Magnates were owners of vast tracts of land, who owned multiple castles, towns, and villages and peasants within these lands. They controlled Poland with no superior power to discipline them. Because of Poland's geographical position, the magnates often aligned themselves individually to foreign powers: Russia, some to the French, Prussia, Sweden. These magnates and their estates lived well and provided minimal sustenance to the peasants. The magnates controlled and produced excess wheat and other grains, vegetables, and lumber, which was shipped up the Vistula River to be exported to hungry populations of other nearby European countries. The gentry included minor nobles and titled individuals like princes and counts, with titles received from the papacy, the Holy Roman Empire, or purchased from some of the large European countries. Minor nobles were both land-holding and landless nobles who affiliated themselves with one of the magnates. This category included men almost as rich and powerful enough to be magnates, down to men with nothing, maybe one horse, and lots of Polish pride. Poland's king, originally inherited, became an elected one. The magnates and gentry doing the voting and preferring to grant the crown to someone outside of Poland rather to one of their own, lest he become too strong. At the death of any king, a riotous election ensued, with foreign powers usually participated with nominees favorable to the interests. Another group, The Catholic clergy and townsmen comprised about 8% of the Polish population. The clergy included, of course, cardinals, bishops, abbots, monks, and friars. Directly linked to the Vatican and Rome, top members of this group owned vast estates and whole villages and towns, with all the peasants included. The clergy were the only people in the area who could read and write, and thus they exerted great political pressure. The magnates and better nobility educated themselves, and a balance of power developed. Townsmen included merchants, craftsmen, and moneylenders who lived in small and large towns in Poland. Because the Catholic religion at the time commanded its believers not to charge interest on a loan, the handling of money became the accepted responsibility of the Polish Jew. The vast majority of Poles were peasants, like the vast majority of all people in medieval Europe. In Poland, 80% of the population were rural peasants. They were not exactly slaves, but they belonged to the land, rarely owned their own homes, had to work stated days for their master, could not move to another village without permission, had no education, and not a remote hope of bettering themselves. Peasants worked their magnate or noble's lands and forests, growing wheat, grains, vegetables, and logging. The few peasant-owned farms were inefficient, very small, and separated from their homes by some distance. The Polish economic conditions deteriorated after 1850. The partition had created turmoil and inefficiencies. Polish lands were an important agricultural producer for all of Europe, but agricultural land was becoming poor through overuse and lack of fertilizers. There was, as elsewhere in Europe, a large increase in the birth rate. The Catholic religion of Poland promoted large families. The number of landless Polish peasants who worked for wages on the land had increased fourfold. This increase could not be absorbed by available farm work or within the developing industries. Small family farms could not feed many people. There were great waves of Prussian and Russian Polish immigration to Western Germany and Northern France, but especially to America for farm peasants. There were many political and cultural pressures to Polish families. So with political and religious and economic pressures, our Polish ancestors decided to seek a better life in America and came to LeSueur County. Dan Callahan will now continue our presentation.
I come to you live from the pancake house. You can see my little tassel of butter on top. That won't last long because it's going to melt right down to the bottom. I am served with a side order of smoked pork sausage from none other than Picarna's Meat Market in Jordan. And that is real good. You can have a refreshment and you can have all these pancakes you want to eat. The syrup comes over them. Oh my, oh my. I'm proud of myself because I taste pretty good. Now, Dan, he is into pancake distribution and he's been helping here for about 5-6 years and he loves his job because after all, in this pancake house, when we're open, it's all you can eat. Thank you, and you have a wonderful evening. Enjoy the rest of our presentation. Good night.
That's me. I have my Johnny Rocket hat and my apron. That's my dad Bud's tractor, right on the front. And I really pimp the pancakes. I told somebody to look for the bigger guys that come out 3 to 1. They're probably eating 8 or 10. So yeah. Last year the record was 16.
Now, this is a word about patriotism, and it'll unfold before your very eyes.
Good evening. My name is Ben. Some of you have seen me on some currency, but you can't hold on to it very long in these inflationary times. But I'm here to talk about history. I was a writer, an inventor, an entrepreneur, and one of the founding fathers of this country. I once flew a kite and just about got electrocuted. So if someone tells you to go fly a kite, you be careful. But there's two young lads called Edison and Tesla that really developed electricity about 100 years after me. But I'm here mainly to talk about history, the preservation of history and the importance that it means to each and every one of us. We must preserve our history. We must remember our history. And learning from it is the most important thing, both the good and the bad. But we must understand why it happened, what happened, and the reasons to make it better. There are some in our midst that think they should modify history to make it sound nicer so people are not offended. But that is not the point. Those people miss the point and try to change things. But that isn't the best way to proceed. So remember history, treasure history, preserve history, and thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Do you have my mule in there?
I can, yeah, do you want to go back to the meal? Okay.
Not the first one, the second one, the short one, the one that just talks about. Well, see what you can find.
I have this one.
Good evening.
Oh, sorry.
There we go.
Sorry.
Good evening. I'm just an old mule that helped out here once in a while. I helped bring in the biffs. A few nights back, we've got 4 out there for your use. Please use them. They're here for you. Some of you probably remember the old days when you might have went to country school and had to use an outdoor bathroom. Well, these are a little bit better, but not a whole lot. We couldn't find a Sears catalog if that's what you prefer, but they're good nonetheless. Dan brought a couple extra rolls around. Say, you know, I'm a mule, and I don't want to talk about my dad. My mother was a beautiful horse, and I'm kind of stubborn. My dad might have even come from Ireland. But anyway, enjoy this show that's about to happen. And you young lads, if the bathroom is full and you can't get in, just find a tree. Just make sure you're on the correct side of that. Now, enjoy yourselves and take care.
That had to be. And now Frank Franciscus is coming in to us live from Poland to talk more about Polish history. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Callahan. My name is Franciscus Retka. You can call me Frank. With the miracle of time, I'm speaking English to you, but I would only spoken Polish when I came to America in 1886. On the screen, you see the Polish white eagle, a symbol of the Polish state and its people representing the strength, courage, and resilience of the Polish nation. It dates back to the year 1295. I'm going to tell you about life as a Polish peasant. To do this, I need to describe the Poland of my grandfather first, and then Poland for me. You see, in 1772, what we call Poland was governed by Russia, Prussia, and Austria. I and my family, like most Polish-speaking people, were peasant farmers. My father and mother and those preceding them were Polish peasant farmers. My grandfather Lucas, born in 1756, grew up and lived in a time in which the place he lived was an independent Poland. Polish peasants like him and his family were serfs, especially owned by wealthy magnates. His family farmed and were tied to a wealthy magnate family who had many individual estates across the great vastness of what was Poland. A magnate's land might cover 60 villages, with every village having 200 people. So a magnate was a powerful person controlling thousands of Polish peasants. Lucas's family spent many years in the Pomeranian area of Poland, southwest of today's Gdańsk. Because they were economically controlled by our magnate family, he lived and worked wherever our estate owner directed. So they moved several times to his various properties. Our magnate and the other magnates were rich and powerful landowners with castles on their multiple estates. Poland was rich in farmland, growing grains and with large forests which were cut and logged. Lucas's family did the farming and the logging. The magnate provided Lucas with materials, and he supplied the labor, and crude houses were constructed for them to live in. These were dirt-floored, log walls, and straw-thatched roof buildings with just the basic furnishings, but they protected them from the wind, rain, and snow that came to Poland. Many of the younger members of the family slept right on the floor on a platform with crude straw mattresses. The houses were located in small villages near the estate farmlands. The home that the magnate provided for us looked like these. 10 to 15 family members would live in a house like this. The house included a big area for their family garden. The magnate owned both the house and the land for the garden. On this garden, the family could grow vegetables and food for their own use. They could use the magnate's forest to find and collect wood for cooking and heating. They could use the magnate's pasture land to graze their farm animals. The magnate's land surrounded the village, and Lucas and his family would walk to the magnate fields to plow, plant, and harvest. They would walk to his nearby forest to log. The magnate supplied the hand tools and the horse or oxen. Lucas and his family had to maintain the magnate's estates. The compulsory work was hard from dawn to dusk. This was for all members of the family, both men and women, and children above 10 years. They worked about 300 days a year for the magnate, but they had obligations to also work 20 days per year for the area duke and 10 days a year for the area bishop. This left about 30 days a year for work for themselves in their own gardens, fields, and houses, growing vegetables and grain, and making clothing and other household chores. In the large garden, they grew potatoes, cabbage, onions, carrots, peas, turnips, parsnips, rutabaga, beets, cucumber, and grains, wheat, rye, barley, and millet. They had a milk cow, or a goat for milk, and chickens, and 8 eggs. They foraged for mushrooms. A common meal was mushrooms and cabbage-filled pierogi, or dumplings, or soup with barley groats added, or sauerkraut. They rarely ate meat, maybe 1 or 2 times a year. There was a peasant saying, "A peasant eats meat when a chicken is sick or when he is sick." The pillars of our diet included floury dishes, groats, cereals, potatoes, and milk. They ate a crude porridge called kasha, made from oats, buckwheat, barley, rye, and millet. They ground almost all of their flour for bread and dumplings with a hand-turned stone kiln. Many of the times the food was inadequate for their needs. It was a blessing if the magnate had a family wedding, since all his peasants would be invited, and they could feast for a couple of days at the wedding celebration and eat meat. Lucas would occasionally get some poor pieces of pig from the magnate or noble, like liver, kidneys, or pig's feet. And his family could make some sausage for a special meal. They could make kishka from kasha, onions and spices and pig's blood, if he was gifted some from the magnate. Or when Lucas could poach a rabbit or a fish from his magnate's forest, lakes or streams, they would find its way into a family meal. Lucas could read and write a little Polish since he was educated by a priest when he was a child during the winter months. Same for his children. The magnates controlled the peasants' lives and circumstance. They needed his permission to marry or to move away from his lands. Many peasants lived their whole lives within 10 miles of their parents' cottage. The magnate decided all disputes and offenses on his properties. When the peasants had money, which wasn't often, they could buy beer at the magnate's taverns or flour from his mills. With the hard life, most peasants only lived until the mid-40s. When the magnate got involved into war, his peasants were obliged to serve alongside him. When the magnate rode into battle, his peasants traveled on foot, and their weapons were crudely made pikes or scythes or wooden weapons. If a peasant captured a horse in battle, that horse became the property of his noble. Sometimes if a peasant served his noble bravely in battle, he could be rewarded with a gift of land. Peasant clothing was handmade from cloth that the women would spin and weave, and peasants didn't have a lot of clothing. Maybe a man would have one jacket, or a woman would have an extra dress saved for special occasions. A small peasant village may have a small church where a traveling priest would hold an occasional mass. In times of my grandfather Lucas, Polish peasants had no voice in the government. The magnates of Poland controlled the government for their own interests. The situation changed very little for peasants like me after the Polish partition of 1772. Since Poland had been divided up by Prussia, Austria, and Russia, some of our magnates' land were in the Prussian zone, or the Austrian zone, or the Russian zone. I was born in 1824 at Sochates, which was in the Russian-controlled part of the former Poland. My father and I later lived in the Pomeranian area of the former Poland controlled by Prussia. These occupied nations gradually installed some laws that changed the relationship between the magnates and peasants. The old feudal system moved toward capitalism, and there was an abolishment of serfdom. The law still favored large landholding magnates over small peasant farmers in German-controlled Pomerania. There was very little change with their day-to-day life over my grandfather Lucas's days, but there were important changes. They included peasants were now free to leave a master's control. Compulsory peasant labor ended. Magnates paid for labor, but with very low wages. Peasants became the owners of their homes and the small acreage family farms and fields, but paid the magnates through rents. Land prices increased. Land excess was extremely competitive as German immigrants took over available Polish lands. The official language in our area was German. German was taught in the schools. The government was Prussian. There was a Germanization of life. This created issues for peasant farmers like me. Most Polish farmers had less than 14 acres. Many of these acres were disconnected. How do you earn and support a family on small amounts of land? The parcels became smaller for the next generation as land was passed through inheritances. The magnates still held and controlled the valuable assets, the farm machinery, the farm buildings, forests, the grazing land, and draft animals. With the magnet controlling the woods and forests, how do we get wood needed for heating and cooking? We had rents to pay, Prussian taxes to pay. We were technically free, but still economically tied to the wealthy magnates for our existence. The times also changed. More Polish land was now under production. There was more efficient farming. Grain prices were up. Magnates wanted more land that belonged to the peasants to put into their own production. The number of Polish peasants around us almost doubled in the 1800s, from about 9 million to almost 22 million. There were too many people competing for work, and along with the political and religious oppression, this created need for immigration. For me and members of my family and other Polish families, it was increasingly hard to find employment and provide for ourselves. The Prussian partition had added 300,000 German citizens to our Polish lands. Russia pressured the Polish to serve in their military. There was compulsory military service installed. The dominant Prussians taxed the occupied Polish people. So, faced with the prospects for the Redka peasant farm family in Polish Pomerania in 1886, we made a decision to leave and try to find a better life as immigrants to America. And at this point, I'd like to introduce Jenny Witt, who is going to tell you how these Poles made the 6,000-mile trip from Poland to LeSueur County.
Thank you, Tom. I don't have a costume, I'm sorry. Dzień dobry, or good day. My name is Jenny Witt, and I am happy and proud to be here this evening to participate in the celebration of my and our Polish heritage. Good job. In 2019, my two aunts, Kathleen Melcher and Sharon Hansen, and I, who are here this evening, we had the fortunate opportunity to tour Poland. We extended the services of our tour guide, Agnieszka, who took us to the small village of Wancho, Poland. Here we were able to visit the grave of Josefa Pienko Ostrowski, the sister of my great-grandfather, Henry Pienko. As we walked cobblestoned paths to see beautiful parks and historic sites, I imagined my ancestors walking those same paths, some destined for the shores of America. Josefa did not immigrate to America as her brother had. Now, our journey was relatively easy. We hopped on a plane in Minneapolis, had a short break in Paris, France, and we were in Warsaw the following afternoon. The opportunities that we had been afforded in America were set in motion more than a century ago by our ancestors. However, their journey to America was dangerous, crowded, and took several weeks. So before I share with all of you what that journey entailed, let us be mindful this evening of honoring and acknowledging all the stories that you will hear tonight. Our ancestors' stories and experiences are now our stories as well. Now, most of the Polish in LeSueur County immigrated from the western part of Poland, which included the Prussian-controlled area of the former Poland. Early settlers in rural communities often came as family units, and in some cases included extended families. Later immigrants, and especially those who took jobs here in Minnesota, were more likely to come as single men or women, sometimes in peer groups from the same village or region. Now, traveling to America and Minnesota from that area meant a long and arduous trip, and an expensive trip for these Polish peasant farmers, especially if they traveled with a family. Now, located in Prussia in the late 1800s, Polish-speaking prospective migrants might have seen an advertisement like this in a local newspaper. This is from the North German Lloyd ad from about the year 1880. Or a similar poster, or perhaps even a family member already in America saw an ad and sent the Polish folks a letter and maybe some funds for such a trip. Now, in order to get to these respective ports, many traveled by train. Railroads were not built in Polish areas until after the partition of 1795, but Polish migrants may have been able to travel by rail since there was a line connecting Berlin, Germany, with Gdansk and Posen. Although uncertain, it can be assumed that most of our Polish relatives rode the train or a combination of river and canal boats and train to get themselves to a major seaport. From the area of Western Prussia, these people would have traveled some way to an ocean seaport. Bremen, Germany on the Baltic coast was a favorite exit port, but some others traveled from Hamburg, Germany, or Antwerp in Belgium. This is a picture from Bremen in 1890, the same year that my ancestors, the Ginter family, left Poland for America. Now, the primary method of traveling to America was by steamship. This particular ship, the SS Dresden, was the actual steamship that my great-grandmother, Mary Ginter Pienko, her parents and siblings, arrived on in 1890. The SS Dresden was launched on December 1st, 1889, under the name SS Dresden for Norddeutscher Lloyd of Bremen, Germany, the very same company that was pictured in the ad you just saw. Now, this is an excerpt from the actual Dresden Manifest bearing the names of Thomas Ginter family, who arrived to the United States on April 16, 1890. At this time, you can see the names of Thomas and Anna, the parents, and then Joseph, Mariana, who was my great-grandmother, and Anna. There were two older children, Veronica Ginter-Plonsky and Paul Ginter, who had arrived earlier and who you will learn a little bit more about shortly. Thomas and Anna also had two more children born in America, Frank and Rose. And this is a copy of Thomas Ginter's immigration card. And you can note the date on there as well, the name of the vessel, and even occupation. It says the nationality is German, which kind of spoke a little bit to Tom's prior presentation. Now, most immigrant families traveled on steamships in the steerage compartment or below deck. In the early days of immigration, the ships used to transport the immigrants were originally built for cargo. So in reality, our family that came here were placed in the cargo hold of a ship. Steerage conditions were inconsistent and very uncomfortable. The ceiling height between the deck was usually 6 to 8 feet, and the bunks were made of rough boards and set up along both sides of the ship. And each bunk was intended to hold 3 to 6 people, called family bunks. This was the kind of accommodation that was advertised in the earlier slide, with a ticket price of $24 from Germany to America. Now, the Ginter family arrived on April 16, 1890 at the port of Baltimore. Now, Baltimore, of course, is located in the central area of Maryland along the tidal portion of the Patapsco River, an arm of the Chesapeake Bay. Now, Baltimore's Inner Harbor was once the second leading port of entry for immigrants to the United States and a major manufacturing center. New York, of course, was the leading port. Castle Garden was the immigration port until 1890, and then, of course, it was Ellis Island after that. Now, it would have been possible to travel to Minnesota largely by water from the East Coast. At Detroit, Chicago, or Milwaukee, 3 U.S. cities where a lot of Poles settled, the Polish immigrants would have had a short rail or stagecoach ride to a river connecting to the Mississippi, and one could have traveled all the way to St. Paul via steamboat. Steamboats began arriving in Minnesota in 1823. In the years that followed, a growing fleet of steamboats turned the upper Mississippi between St. Louis and St. Paul into a major artery for immigrants moving to Minnesota. Now, in Minnesota, Polish immigrants settled in Winona and northeast Minneapolis, 2 Mississippi River cities that would have been accessible to steamboats. Immigrant transport by steamboat all but ending at the turn of the century, 1900 or so, as rail transport started to dominate. Polish immigrants to LeSueur may have traveled by steamboat up the Mississippi from some point and ending up in St. Paul. However, by the end of the Civil War, the expansion of the rail system throughout the Midwest drove the Mississippi riverboats almost to extinction, reducing possible immigrant transport. In the mid to late 1800s, there was a variety of ways to travel to Minnesota. Rail transport was somewhat developed by that era, but not to the extent of it is today. But one can see by the rail map of 1880 of the U.S., in 1880 and after, immigrants with cash for a ticket could travel from a major East Coast seaport city and could find a way via rail to get to a city in Minnesota or Wisconsin, and then connect to a rail line to a location within walking distance of LeSueur County. Stagecoaches did run in Minnesota. This poster shows an ad for a stage company that traveled off the termination of early railroad lines. But it would seem that most stagecoaches would have ceased operation with the expansion of rail within Minnesota. So by 1880, most parts of Minnesota were linked by railroads, rendering the stage routes obsolete. So our Polish immigrants to LeSueur County likely did not arrive by stagecoach. Some may have arrived by steamboat, but most likely rail. And their arrival to LeSueur County initiated the growth of the Polish population that we are speaking about today. Thank you, or dziękuję. I would now like to welcome Jean Redka to come on up.
So my part is about how the Polish immigrants got started in LeSueur County. They had very little money, as you can imagine, after having traveled 6,000 miles from Poland. Many of them were single or newlyweds, and so they didn't have the burden of children, although there were some did come with their children. So to get started, they not having any money, they worked as farm laborers, and they worked. The Irish had come to this country many years before the Polish, so the Polish immigrants worked typically for Irish people, and so they were able to share cultures between the Polish and the Irish, and to this day, the Polish and the Irish get along pretty well, with a few exceptions. We won't go into that. So their first step here was to rent a plot of land on area farms to earn some income. So they continued working as farmhands for others at the same time they rented land. You might ask where these Polish settlers lived while they raised money for their futures. Now there comes the Paul Ginter story. That was told by the late Joe Gill. You see his picture there. So Paul Ginter built several primitive houses on 1-acre tracts on his 120 acres in Section 16 of Darien Township. You see the house there. Now, the house is not unlike the cabins you saw that we had, that were the settlers had in Poland. So he rented Paul Ginter rented these tracts out, cabins out to the Polish immigrants. The houses or cabins were like the homes of the Polish that they had in Poland.
The photo is actually from a postcard, so perhaps Mr. Ginter was using it for advertising somehow. The settlers were able to have a garden plot with this cabin and raise some vegetables out of their own gardens, as well as having a few chickens and a few pigs. When they had saved enough money, they were able to strike out on their own and doing their own farming. So that pretty much covers. Now, just a couple examples of the immigrants. Paul Ginter being one of them, and you've heard quite a bit about him and his family. He was born in Prussian-occupied Poland in 1874. He immigrated in 1888 with his father Thomas and his mother Annie and a brother and sister. They immediately moved to Darien Township. In 1900, they rented a farm. As I noted, there was other Ginter families in Darien Township. And in 1910, at the age of 36, Paul Ginter had his own farm. Frank Retke was another example. He was my great-grandfather. His wife was Justine Zeman, and he immigrated from Poland with a bunch of kids. Frank married Elizabeth Stipp. Ignatz, or Michael, married Veronica Miska. Valentine married Catherine Meager. I'm a product of that union. And then John married Marianne Paul, and after a while he immigrated up to the Little Falls area and started a clan up there. There's a few of those here tonight. And then Pauline was married to Martin Lavin. Annie was married to Matt Plunsky. Those are common names around here. And finally, Mary Ann was married to John Malinsky. And that takes up my program. Next on our program is Alice Hill. Only Alice is a little bit under the weather. I don't know if she had too much to drink or what, but she found somebody to take her place. So that's good.
The whole thing is.
Alice, always the teacher, knows how to find us out. My name is Lisa Anderson Leiniger, and I am the granddaughter of John and Mary Ann Malinsky from out in the Cordova area. My mom, Jerry, is here today as well. You can't say no to Alice.
Nope.
And I wouldn't. I'm putting the... I did. All right. I'm reading from this Small White Feathers book. It's a compilation of the family history of John Malinsky. And the dedication is this. This work is dedicated to the immigrant families that built this land we call our home. The families that brought their traditions, language, religions, skills, and faults to create a nation of peoples as varied as they are alike. This work is dedicated to all these families, but it is especially dedicated to John Malinsky, the patriarch of this family, the family whose history these pages record. This is our tribute to the gentle, powerful man whose life gave us life. This is the work of his hand. This book is about Alice's grandpa's family and was done by all the cousins, spearheaded by Alice's sister, Rita. The white eagle, the symbol of the Polish nation, has provided the title of this collection. From the land where the white eagle soars,
nests in the most forbidding mountain reaches, survives in the scarcity of its range. From that land there came a man of courage, a man of strength, a man of perseverance, a man determined to carve a future for his descendants in a new land. That new land stripped him of his children, many in their early years, robbed him of his wife before her family grew, took his language and his traditions and replaced them with strange customs, hardship, poverty, and struggle. It gave him little in return for his labor, but he survived. He survived to see his children and his children's children to the 4th generation. We are the small white feathers, the white feathers of the great white eagle of Poland, passed to us by that man. Passed to us by the man from the land of the white eagle, continued in this land of the bald eagle. The land also symbolized by the majestic bird that soars in the mountains of America. We are the family, the continuation, the progression. A century plus 42 years, 142 years after John Malinsky took unto himself a wife. We join in his dedication to the future. We are his family. We are testament to his hopes, the fulfillment of his dreams, the perpetuation of his blood. We are Poland and America. We are yesterday, today, and tomorrow. We are blood and bone and flesh of John Malinsky. But most of all, we are the soul, the spirit of this strong, quiet man.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Barb Mager Boyson, from the 4th generation descendant of some of the original settlers of St. Joseph's Parish. Many of the first parishioners of St. Joseph's Church were Kashubians. Kashubia was an area in Pomerania near the Baltic Sea, where a distinct dialect of the Polish language was spoken. After life became difficult for the Kashubians and other Polish Catholics, then ruled by Prussia, they felt a need to find a new place where they could find work and were free to speak their language and practice their Catholic faith. So many of them moved from Pomerania, about 250 miles, to near Warsaw, and from there, thousands of Kashubians later migrated around the world. In 1901, the Kashubians who settled in Lexington Township, LeSueur County, wanted a church of their own. They approached Bishop John Ireland for permission to build. Thank you. They approached Bishop John Ireland. The Articles of Incorporation indicate that Reverend Alphonse Kutos, Joseph Rakowski, and Michael Pulowski were the representatives of the people of St. Joseph. John and Veronica Pulowski deeded 2 acres of land to the parish in exchange for $100 cash on September 28, 1901. The 60-foot by 30-foot wooden church cost $4,000 in 1902. 10 men of the parish took their horse-drawn wagons and left at 4 a.m. for Kasota, approximately 30 miles, to pick up Kasota stone for the foundation. The basement wasn't dug under the church until 1940. The shingles were hand-hewn from local lumber. The beautiful altars and statuary were not custom-made, but we can assume they were a large portion of the cost. The original bell cost $30 and was donated by Joe Rakowski. However, it cracked and was replaced in 1922. Then, C.N. Cosgrove of LeSueur Green Giant donated $25. Each parish family was assessed $3.75. On installation day, Frank Singer and John Retka were way up high waiting for the bell to be raised. There was a bushel basket on the ground beside the bell. Anyone who threw in money in the basket had the privilege of ringing the bell once. In 1907, the pastor asked for the bishop's permission to build a rectory beside the church, hoping a resident pastor would follow soon. The estimated cost was, $3,000. Landowner assessments were $30 for owners up to 40 acres of land, $45 for more than 40 acres, $25 for renters, and $15 for workers. Maybe some members didn't want to contribute because there were notices for 3 weeks in the Lee Center Leader for a loan of $3,000 at the going rate of interest and offering good security on a mortgage or note. At any rate, it still took a long time to finally get a resident pastor. Father John Sleva arrived in 1948. He said the Mass in Latin and the sermon in English, except for one Sunday a month when he did the sermon in Polish for the old people of the parish. I remember he taught First Communion class and a 2-week summer Bible study inside the church. He usually wore a long black cassock, but when he taught the confirmation class in the rectory, he wore a casual summer shirt and slacks. Unfortunately, he got cancer, and he died in 1960. There was a wake for him in the church, and his open coffin was in the middle aisle where his full body was on display, just like Pope Francis a couple of weeks ago. These names listed in the Great Kashubian Migration document became part of the St. Joseph Church community. The first to arrive was Joe Rakowski. He later encouraged his Polish neighbors to also emigrate to the area. And if, as I say the names, if those of you who have a connection would like to stand and remain standing by your choice, we'll find out how many of us do have connections. There were the Benziks and the Semenskys. There were the Drzinskys and the Ginters. There were the Glazhinskys and the Molenskys. And the Polskys. There were the Pienkos and the Klonskys. The Rakowskis and the Retkas. The Singers and the Stips and others. And that gave us all a stretch, didn't it? For some of us. St. Joseph had beautiful stained glass windows and an awesome rose window in the choir loft. Parishioners who donated enough to purchase a window could have their name inscribed in it. Nobody told me that Yana Magura was actually my great-grandfather, John Megger. The first baptisms were on September 28, 1902, for Joe T. Benzik, Michael Glazhinsky, and Michael Benzik. There was also an ad in the Lee Center Leader for a picnic that Sunday. The next Sunday, Anna Pienko and Sophia Plonsky were baptized. Apparently no picnic for the girl babies. The first altar boys were John S. Pulowski, John Redka, Joseph F. Benzik, and Frank Singer. The first organist was John Gajovnik, but Barney Adamer came from Heidelberg for many years. Then Olive Semensky and finally Alice Semensky were the organists. On February 24, 1903, John Sosefsky and Martha Mager were the first to be wed at St. Joseph's, followed by many generations of weddings. This is John D. Mager and Veronica Schiffert's wedding in 1916. When Amelia Redka and her brother Anton received First Communion in 1916, their certificates were still written in Polish. You can find them on a display over where on the wall?
Over there.
Up there, okay? This is Albert Dzerzhinsky and Ida Redka's wedding in 1920. Albert was the son of Jacob Dzerzhinsky and Rosalia Mager. Ida was the daughter of Frank Redka Jr. and Elizabeth Stipp. They lived close to the church, and Frank rang the Angelus bell 3 times a day at 6, 12, and 6. So the people nearby would know that what time it was, and the horses also knew when it was time to go back to the barn to eat. This is Raymond and Sylvester Mager's 1930 First Communion. And here's one of the next generation, St. Joseph generation to get married, Raymond Mager and Leona Neisen in 1944. And here's a modern First Communion picture only 70 years ago.
Very nice, very nice.
St. Joseph's was a place for multiple generations to celebrate lots of special occasions. In 1965, some of my generation retraced those steps that so many other couples had taken at St. Joseph's over the years. Sadly, St. Joseph's Church closed in 2008, and in 2011 it was moved here to Pioneer Power for current and future generations to appreciate. The church building is gone, but memories of the Polish community and its rich heritage remain. Many of the Polish community remain there in the cemetery. There's a belief that the Polish don't rest until they're buried in Polish soil. In 1985, some of the Molinsky siblings went to Poland and collected soil from their ancestral church, also named St. Joseph, and they brought that soil back to Minnesota, where it was eventually sprinkled on those Polish graves in Lexington. The largest monument in the center front is in honor of Julius Spry, a generous St. Joseph donor. The first recorded burial in the cemetery was Genevieve Blachik in 1903. And here's a collage of gravestones for some of the other Polish buried in Lexington. And now, Dan Callahan will talk about the early LeSueur County Country Schools. Thank you.
I come from experience because I went to one of these schools for 6 years. There was only 5 of us towards the end. I was the only one in my class for 6 years. So I basically had a private tutor. Anyway, the schools were made first out of logs. And sometimes they were held in the cabins. But then later on they built schools and they donated land just like they donated to the church. That was an example of the actual church. You want to go back to that. The actual school and they had the potbelly stove. They burned wood, and then they burned a few other coal later on, and then we all went to fuel oil. And in 1912, I believe this map, no, it's 89, there were about, I think, 400 students in the LeSueur County area, and there were many different schools. I'm going to highlight the Lexington School, and that's right on the beach. Must have been a nice place to go. That's where Alice and some of the Malinskys went, and a lot of Polish children from the area. But one thing we want to know about Lexington, it was settled by the Yankees from New England, and that's why they called it Lexington. And they thought they were going to make a big city. They had it all platted out, and it was looking good. But then the railroad went through the center, and about all there now is a couple of houses and a beer joint and a trailer park. But this is, I remember this because we used to go swimming after we got done with the hay with a bar soap. And that's a pretty good school. All right, that's the first one, and a lot of people from around here went to that school and learned their reading, writing, and arithmetic and history. The next school is my school, District 107. When I did the Irish, I had the school talking, but there's no need for that. It started out, it was land donated in Section 16 by Ed Holleran, and his wife was a Shea, and they donated 2 or 3 acres of their land, like a lot of people did, for these schools. It started out an Irish school, but that changed. We'll get into that a little bit later. The other school north was the Sharkey School, and I can remember my dad saying that that's where he first met Aloysius Gill, and Aloysius and him were lifelong friends. And my Uncle John met Joe Gill, and then I got to know Joe. Boy, what a guy he was. But that was called the Sharkey School, and later on, Joe Sharkey made it into a house, and it was right down the old Sharkey Road. So a lot of these schools were named after the landowner, but it was kind of interesting. The next generation of Hollerans do not want to believe that Polish people came to this church, this school. Well, about 1903, half of this school was Polish. And when I talked to Margie Holleran's daughters, they don't want to believe it. I said, well, there, look on the wall. And they came in, and in fact, there were so many, and I think you know them, girls. Anyway, there were so many that moved into this neck of the woods. They started on County 32, and they were Callahan's and my relatives' lands. And they sold it, but they called it Little Chicago, because these folks came all the way down from Norby Corner, all the way to Lexington, and it was all Polish, all Polish. This is an example of the people that were there. And you can see Mike Moriarty might be related to one of the Moriartys that I know, was a teacher. Initially, some of the teachers were men, and they did whatever. But later on, a lot of women took over the teaching. And I know several of them that did, and I'll point to one. My teacher was Mary Elizabeth Keogh. She taught me all 6 years. She was like a tutor, like I said. But Fritz Bianco, Frances Hayden, went to this school. She actually taught her little sister, Dorothy, at the school. She stayed there 6 or 7 years. And any of you know Fritz and Colette, you understand. You do understand. So anyway, what she did, it was during the Depression. She had a high school diploma, and then she went on to normal school. Sometimes it was a year, 2 years. It just depended on what you did. And they started out paying these teachers $50 a month. Fritz got a raise. She got $79 a month. But along with that, they gave them a dress code. They had to dress a certain way, behave a certain way. And a lot of them ended up living with a neighbor, a farmer next door, or in Fritz's case, just with that crowded Pianco house where your Uncle Tony lived for a while. So I know some of these. It is very interesting. These schools were great. I mean, when I'd walk to school, if I went through Denny Holler's field, it took me maybe a few minutes, and it was less than a mile away. And one of the events, every spring, our teacher hated gophers because she wanted the playground. And these gophers made huge mounds that we could trip over. So what happened was she would gather the boys out in the spring, and we would bail water out of Denny Holler's creek. And she would scoop off and get the hole open for us to pour water in. And she'd be standing at the other end with a baseball bat, yelling at us, saying, "Boys, they're coming out, more water, more water." And she'd hit them as they came out. Now, we were all farm kids. We knew we butchered chickens. It didn't matter to us. But if you did that today, they'd put you in a psych ward and they'd say, "What's wrong with you? You saw your teacher kill gophers." So it was a good time. I mean, we were right out there. We put on plays at Christmas time. She had and you all, some of you know him, Jim Keogh. He would build a stage for us, and we'd put on a show. I'll never forget, I was playing Tiny Tim, and I was laying on a bed. And that little school out there was full. And Dennis Sharkey was standing in the back with a big S-eaching grin on his face, smiling at me, you know. I didn't have many lines. I just laid in the bed and played sick. That was all right. And here's an example of the school kind of put together. We had a lot of good people. And this is where the Irish and the Polish kind of got to be friends. But Brown was friends with one of them. And some of them went to school. Jim Sullivan went to school, and he liked this redhead Redka gal. So that's where that came to be. And the school, Tommy Redka says, this was first example of integration when the Polish came in. But they were similar religion, and that's why we got along. And they had a great work ethic, I'll say that. I worked with some of them later on. But thank you for this, and who is next? Oh yes, well there's Fritz's diploma. The other graduate from there, I couldn't get his diploma, was Bernard Redka. He was one of the first ones. And Tommy Redka has told me there were 17 Redkas that went to that school. And I knew Peggy and Alan and me, you know, I thought they were actually Dick and Jane. Because they were always nice dressed, they were nice looking kids. I said, they must be Dick and Jane. But they were some of the last Polish kids that went there. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you everybody for listening to the presentation tonight. My name is Kristen. I'm a member of the New Prague Area Historical Society, and while this was not a New Prague Area Historical Society sponsored event, we worked in partnership to help organize it with all the wonderful presenters that were up here today. Everybody that came in today that presented, they put their heart and soul and a lot of time and energy into researching all of the information you heard tonight. So we'd like to say thank you to all of the presenters tonight. You guys did a fantastic job. There was so much time and preparation that they all put into making this a success. So we appreciate everything, all the time and energy. So next we're going to be having some family anecdotes. So this will be an opportunity. We're going to invite Barb Boykin back up. And she has prepared it's on a few different Polish families in the community. She's going to come up and speak on them. And after that, we're going to have an invitation from the audience to share family stories as well. And I will bring the microphone around for you to speak. So, Barb, if you'd like to come on back up.
These are my great-grandparents. All of them were born in Borchers-Foley Parish in Pomerania, where there were once records back to the 1300s, but in 1700 those earlier records were destroyed in fire. This is my Polish half of a 6th generation pan tree. The leaves above indicate that their ancestors named for many more generations. In my Shipwright-Sueda branch of the family, it seems that all lines led to my 9th great-grandfather, Brazini Goci Shipwright. Zapchen was the Pomeranian village of the family, Zapchen was the Pomeranian village where my Mager and Ginter ancestors were born and lived for many, many generations. My great-grandparents, John Shipwright and Mary Sueda, were baptized and married in Poland before coming to America in 1890. John and Mary could speak both Polish and German. Grandma Mary's funeral was at St. Joseph's Catholic Church on November 11, 1940, the date of the infamous Armistice Day blizzard. The day began unseasonably warm and sunny. The pallbearers wore suits, overcoats not even considered. After the funeral, people headed to the Shipwright family home for the luncheon. Before long, a full-blown blizzard had developed, and lots of people were stranded. My dad and his brother, who were pallbearers, borrowed overcoats and walked 3 miles, often backwards, cross-country to get home to feed the livestock. They rigged a wagon and sleigh runners, hitched their horses to it, and drove back to the Shipwright house. There they collected the stranded men and gave them a sleigh ride back to their farms. Great-grandpa John A. Mager and Josephina Ginter were married near Warsaw, Poland, and emigrated to America in 1885 with 2 young children. John and Josephina were also buried in the St. Joseph Cemetery. At the church's 75th anniversary, my great-uncle, Paul Mager, informed me that his widowed grandmother, Anna Ginter, also came to America after John and Josephina, and was also buried at the St. Joseph Cemetery. That could actually make me 5th generation, counting 4. My grandparents, John and Veronica Mager, were married at St. Joseph's in 1916. John and Veronica filled their family tree with 13 children and 55 grandchildren, and a dog on the right. The 1943 family photo was taken when their oldest son was home on leave from Germany during World War II. My parents, Raymond and Leona Neisenmager, were married on a warm and sunny day in November 1944, and they were spared a November blizzard. They're also buried in St. Joseph's Cemetery. This is Grandma and Grandpa Mager's 50th anniversary photo with their 11 adult children. The Mager family of Darien Township knew how to celebrate. In heaven there is no beer or moonshine. That's why my grandpa and others made it here. This is Grandpa John Mager's still. There are stories about how much moonshine he actually made, but apparently lots of people bought his quality product even after Prohibition. Grandpa made so many trips up to Little Falls to deliver moonshine that the cow he used over and over for cover eventually knew the routine and walked up the ramp on its own when it was time for delivery. He often cooked moonshine on a cloudy day in January after a snowstorm that blocked the country roads, and he was sure that the revenuers wouldn't be dropping in. There was a time when the revenuers found the still, but not the coils, hidden in a tree. So he was able to continue making moonshine, and the best part was he had more to sell because he seldom drank his own product. And that's my family's contribution to life in LeSueur County.
I'd like to check in with anybody. Does anybody else here have any family stories they'd like to share? And if you do, okay. If you'd like to just stand up and say your name, please.
Hi, my name is Garrett Kowalski, and I live in Montgomery. I don't have the history that you guys have, obviously, but my family were Holocaust survivors, and my father was one of them. And he came here, a little closer, okay. He was 3 years old when Hitler invaded Poland in 1939. He watched his brother get tortured and killed in front of him. And from there, the stories kept going. Nobody ever really told us really what happened, but we picked up bits and pieces over the years. So I'm going to share a few stories and kind of some of the things that they went through before the end of World War II. So the one story that really kicked out for me was a story I heard when I was a little kid about how they used to scrounge for food in the Warsaw Ghetto. My dad told me a story about how he used to go under the walls and get food and try to get back before the Germans killed him. And that's, I think there's a scene in Schindler's List or something like that that's very similar to that. So when I watched that movie, it was kind of hitting home. The next one that came up was how the family left Europe. So toward the end of World War II, somehow or another, a Polish Catholic farmer and his family hid them out under a pig trough somewhere in Poland. I have no idea where. But the idea being that they stayed there for an extended period of time amongst all the other tragedies they went through. And after World War II ended, they left the pig trough and they went to a DP camp in Germany where the Leica camera factories were made. And from there, the story continues. My aunts were born in 1946 in the DP camp, and my grandfather had some injuries or something, and he wasn't allowed to come to the United States without sponsorship. Well, one of the grocery companies, I believe it was Red Owl, sponsored our family to come to Minnesota in 1951. So that is a different aspect of what everybody has here, obviously. But on another note, everybody was talking about the 1850s and 1890 migration here, and there was a comment made about Northeast Minneapolis. Well, my mom's family came here during that time period. So more or less, we all got something similar on our background and our histories, but not to the extent that goes back 125, 150 years. But I think it's great that everybody does what they do here, and I think it's really great that everybody has participated.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to share a family story, a history, fun anecdotes, things that were passed down? Okay, I'll head right over there.
One thing, my name is Gene Retka. I'm also from Little Falls. One of the things that Frank Retka, Frank Jr., who lived behind the church, right? He's the one that did the Angelus. Who did that? Okay. Anyway, the ladies here with us, they're related to the Singer family and, of course, Retkas. And they knew Frank Jr. Through they didn't know her, their mother did. Her name was Helen Fusi, and she was a Retka too. But she always used to talk about Frank, and she always called him Kościelny. Do you know what Kościelny is in Polish? Kościoła is the Polish for church. Kościelny means he rang the bell in the church. So that fits with the story you were talking about. The other thing, talk about Polish, my name is Retka. My grandmother's name was Mary Szweda, and her mother was Magdalena Benzik. And I would like, I have, and also on my grandfather's side, John Retka, Mary Paul. I'd like to find out if anybody has anything, and I'm sure a lot of you folks do. I'd like to find out about the Paul family. Michael, you got an email or something from somebody regarding that. we'd like to get a little more information on that. But I'm also interested in the Shveda side because my grandmother's name was Mary. She had a sister Rose, and one of them was a nun down in, I'm going to say Missouri or someplace down there. And anyway, my great-grandmother Magdalena Benzik married Thomas Shveda, and then he died. She had Frank and John and my grandmother married. And then she married John Ginter. Now that's what you brought up, right? John Ginter?
I thought it was Joe Ginter. I didn't bring it up, but I...
Okay, but anyway, so his name is John Ginter. He's buried in the cemetery. I don't know if he's next to Magdalena. I think Magdalena has her own stone. But nevertheless, I would like to make connections, thank you, if I could, please, of my Benzik and Ginter and, let's see, Shveda especially. And also, she had Frank Shveda and his wife, Agnes, had a daughter that got married to a Trinka. You folks do any Trinkas around here at all?
Oh, yeah, lots of
T-R-N-K-A.
Bohemians.
Bottom around Montgomery?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I'd like to trace some of that too. So, thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else that would like to share any family history, any fun stories?
I'm here.
Oh, over there, okay.
You love this, don't you? Yeah. Oh, it's me.
Oh, is it you?
I don't know. Anybody else?
Oh, sorry, okay. Mine's just a quick story. I'm a Ginter Pianko descendant, and across the road from us growing up lived another Ginter. It was my mom's cousin, and we were on a party line. And whenever there was something juicy to talk about, they'd talk Polish to each other.
Okay.
Sorry. Oh, 1 second.
Okay. And
Thank you. Oh, Dan, did you want to say something?
yeah,
We have, unlike the song Whiskey in the Jar by Tin Lizzy, we have a donation. All it is a free will offering. And these proceeds, whatever we obtain, are going to go for the church and the school maintenance. Nowhere else. Nobody's going to collect it. I want to segue onto what Gary said. I got a lot of information from Tom Retka, and he told me in some of his writings how many Polish people were taken away to Dachau because they had compassion for the Jewish people, and they housed them, and they took care of them. But some of the common names around here, like Redka, whatever, they're gone forever. The other thing I think some of you might have come to know was that there was a family in Poland that towards the end of the war they were housing a family or two of Jewish people. The Gestapo was getting a little crazy with power, and there were 9 in this family, and the mother was pregnant. They shot them all. But last year, the Pope canonized the whole family. That was very interesting. Does anyone want to come up and talk about White Feathers and John Malinsky? I read that book 3 times, and I would recommend it for anybody. I wish other families had gone into that kind of depth, because it is amazing. So I'm going to tell you about John. John was 15, and he was quite a strapping lad. It talks about him stripping nude and going catching fish and eels in the lake, and he actually did that. And he suffered with a fever for a while. He got over that, but the Russians, as they did in most countries, they conscripted him. They sent him to Crimea when he was 15 years old for 5 years. And what the Russians did, they gave them sticks, they gave them shafts and stuff, and they put them up front. And then, after most of them got killed, then they took over and they shot whoever was left. Anyway, John got back to what was ever Poland, and he was getting framed by a neighbor who did something terribly wrong, and he thought he was going to have to go to jail. So he says to his family, I got to leave. So he goes all the way through Germany, whatever it was Germany, through France without any money, heading to America, and then he stowed away on a ship. No money. But he got in good with the guy that was running the, what we would call the scullery, or the restaurant on the ship. So he hired him on and fed him. Then he came to the U.S., and again, he had no money, and he made it here and raised his family. And quite a lot of them, I know a lot. I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Jankowski, and if anybody else has anything else they need, please tell us. We want to hear what you have. Thanks again for Giesenbrau for hanging out. We appreciate that.
Don't leave. Tell them not to leave yet.
Aaron just said there's more beer left, so if you need more beer, go ahead and go grab another one.
We're just going to thank you.
Okay, did you want to do that now?
Yeah.
Let's do that. Yeah, I'm going to have them do that.
Thank you. I want to thank all you attendees. Don't leave yet because we got a finale here. You don't want to miss this. I want to thank all our presenters. We've been working on this thing for about a year, and so thank all the presenters. Thanks to Pioneer Power for making the facility available to us. Thank you. Thanks to the Redkas from Morrison County for making a way down here. Thank you. Thank you for KCHK Radio. And right now, Dick is going to do something here.
And I'm not sure what, but thank you. I see a gentleman with a gopher jacket on. That's beautiful. Just for you, I brought my trombone kazoo, which you probably never seen because they don't make these anymore, I don't think. But I want to play the Minnesota Rouser in your honor. How's that? I'll be around for autographs for about 3 minutes. Thank you.